All right, good. He's here. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we have today joining us for our discussion the one, the only Josh Dunham, host of Senpai Coast to Coast and the founder of WaveMotionCanon.com.
I like this manga. It's very good. It's the goodest manga I've read in a long time. End review.
Devilman!
Let's see, that would be our shortest episode ever.
And that's why you got me on the podcast.
Yeah, that's why we got you on the podcast, Josh, because you
no
were
more 4-hour-long podcasts. That was nice and succinct.
Yeah, you're known for your less than 2-hour podcasts.
Jeez Louise, man. So yeah, I'm Josh Dunham. You probably have not heard of or from me for a very long time. But I'm still around and kicking, just much, much, much slower than usual.
Excellent. And it's great to have you back on the show, Josh. It has been over a year and a half since we've had you on here.
Christ Jesus, has it been that long? Fuck.
Yes, the last time we talked was during our Inuyasha manga fight.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember that shit. Dude, that was dope. That was hella dope.
I think that we should do a rematch on the subject of today's discussion, actually. We should schedule a manga fight about the manga we'll be talking about today for sometime at a later date. I think we could get into a really cool, passionate argument about it or have some really fun debates surrounding it. Because this is a title with a storied legacy and a lot of crazy things to cover.
So yeah, what are we talking about, Sid?
We are talking about a classic manga from the legendary Go Nagai, who is celebrating his 50th anniversary of his career this year with a bunch of multimedia projects that are popping up all throughout the year, including, most famously, right at the beginning of the year, Devilman Cryberry, Masaki Yuasa's adaptation of his original Devilman manga, which hit Netflix and took the anime fandom by a storm. People were saying right at the beginning of the year that it was already anime of the year. It was that good. It was that amazing and impressive. But even before then, Seven Seas had undertaken the effort to license and translate Go Nagai's material. So it's a fortuitous coincidence that they had scheduled their release of Go Nagai's original manga for this year. And in May 2018, it came out in a beautiful hardcover volume. The first of two hardcovers that will comprise the entirety of the original Devilman, plus a little extra in the form of Shin Devilman chapters, which have been sliced in here as well.
Yeah, that was an interesting surprise that I definitely didn't find out just before this recording.
Apparently, Shin Devilman has been included in re-releases of the Devilman manga since the late 80s. Specifically, the version that Seven Seas decided to localize and release also included it in the order that it is presented in their edition.
So if I could interject right here, just like a fun fact, nothing like super serious, but this is actually not the first English language release of Devilman. Back in the day, Kodansha did a dual bilingual release or whatnot, and essentially it had the Japanese outside of the panels and that sort of thing, and then you could actually read the English translation in there. It was really, really neat. I have one of the volumes lying around somewhere, but
nice.
Yeah, it's pretty dope. But I mean, it's nice to have the actual proper treatment and actually have this in such a nice format, a very nice kind of looking book here. And of course, Seven Seas, I was really hoping that Vertical would pick it up because I really want to see the Vertical treatment given to this, but like, I guess Go Nagai and Tezuka are not the same person. Go figure. So.
Well, I think Seven Seas gave this book the vertical treatment in terms of, like, the quality of vertical books, because it's a really nice-looking hardcover. They've got lots of color pages in here, and the pages are super crisp and nice and quality material. Like, this is a really good-looking book. It's pretty damn great release.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really surprised at how high quality it was. Honestly, when I got it in the mail, I'm personally very happy with it.
I wasn't too surprised because I think they knew they wanted to put in, like, they wanted to go the extra mile with this release, because they originally intended to release this in February, but then they pushed it back into May. So they want to give this some extra time.
This would have been a great gift for your Valentine. I don't know why they didn't do that.
So I guess, Sid, do you want to go over just really quickly about what Devilman is actually about?
Devilman is the story of two boys, Ryo, Asuka, and Akira Fudo. And so Akira Fudo starts off the series as this meek, good little boy. Well, he's not a little boy, but, he's an innocent fella. He doesn't like picking fights. He isn't the violent type, but he is constantly getting bullied because of that. But he doesn't like to fight with fists. He tries to talk people down, but he can't stand up for, like, himself with violence. And that is until his good buddy Ryo Asuka returns, and he has a changed man. He has a cold, cool demeanor, really indifferent about violence and everything, and he just has random guns he keeps in his coat and he threatens people with. And there's something off about him, but Akira is just happy to see his friend again. But Ryo is not back just for pleasantries, just for fun's sake. No, he's here to recruit Akira for a cause, and that cause is to fight against the return of demons who are awakening from their 2 million-year-old slumber. And so Ryo has realized, because of his father's research, that the demons are planning to invade humanity, take over human bodies, and destroy humanity from within. And so the only way to fight demons is to become a demon himself. So he has recruited Akira because Akira is so pure of heart. And because he is so pure of heart, he is the only one who could harness the power of a devil and still retain his humanity. At least that's what Ryo thinks, in theory. And so they go to this crazy nightclub full of debauchery and sin and orgies and drugs, all that fun stuff. And then Ryo just starts shooting people, killing people in order to, cause negative emotions to swell, cause chaos to entice the demons to take over human bodies, and begin a ritual that will allow Akira to also get possessed himself. And Akira does, and he becomes Devilman. And then the rest of the story is Devilman fighting against demons who want to take him down and take over humanity, and then eventually he becomes involved in the war between humans and demons itself, and how that eventually reduces down to a war between humans turning against each other.
So it's also important to mention real quick that in this process of demons kind of taking control of humans or whatnot, that usually is what happens, is that the demon fuses with a human, and the human kind of loses their human form and actually becomes, one of these demons or whatnot. And it's like a full-fledged, basically just as if it were like a monster from, the depths of hell type shit. Devilman, Akira, is very important in this fact because he gets possessed by Amon, but because he is such a Peter Parker, very mild-mannered young kid, his innocence kind of overpowers, the general of hell. He's basically like Satan's right hand, and that's, that type of shit. He's the most powerful demon. So he is kind of caught in the middle, and this plays a very big role going forward, being caught in the middle, kind of all this different, these different teams, and like, what is your identity and that sort of thing. There are a lot of themes that play off of this fact here in Devilman, and Go Nagai's other works as well, which I'm sure will come up here and there in conversation, but like, damn, like that whole scene of just that happening. I remember I got introduced to this. I'm going off on a tangent, and bring me back if I'm going too crazy.
I was gonna say, I guess, like, before we get into all that, what is I kind of want to talk about like what our experience with Devilman and Go Nagai is. I guess just going into reading the manga here from Seven Seas, because personally, really, it wasn't like my first exposure to Devilman. I guess technically, because like, you know, even before I watched Crybaby on Netflix, you know, I was pretty aware of like of, you know, all the certain pages from the manga that had become like memes, and people would use those and whatnot. Because Ryo Asuka is a perfect character for internet memes, because he has some of the funniest pages in the entire series. And whether they're intentional or not, I have no idea. But I think that's just part of the magic of Devilman. So, you know, I didn't really know much about it going into Crybaby, and you know, personally, I really enjoyed Crybaby. It's like by the end, I really liked it, and I really enjoyed it. The ending of Crybaby in particular, and so, you know, watching Crybaby, I was pretty much convinced to, you know, check out the original source. And you know, I've basically only read as much as Seven Seas is released, but, you know, so far, just to kind of jump ahead here real quick, I feel pretty compelled to read the rest. I'm really liking what I'm reading so far, and yeah, like I haven't really had any experience with any other Go Nagai stuff. I haven't really ever read any like Cutie Honey or anything. I'm struggling to remember off the top of my head his other works. I think
Mazinger Z, Shameless School.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot about that, you know, on the internet, especially like through Maxi Bernard, a good friend from Friendship Ever Victory, who's talked about it before in various circles. And so, you know, I've always heard about Go Nagai's work secondhand, but like, I guess really it wasn't until this year that I've really experienced any Devilman. And like I said, I'm really liking what I've read so far. What about you guys?
For me, my introduction was basically through the Jason Thompson article that featured on ANN, like way back when. And
House of a Thousand Manga.
Yes, like Jason Thompson is an amazing guy. Like, I would love to just sit down at his feet and have him tell me stories about like his days editing the American edition of Shonen Jump, or like fucking just going on and on about manga. But basically, he started talking about Devilman, and he had a whole article devoted to it. And I was like, what the fuck is this? I didn't even know who Go Nagai was. Now it's like, how can you not know who Go Nagai is? I'd say he's nearly as impressive as Tezuka and some of his contributions to the manga community, the manga world, you know, not nearly as pioneer-like, but in some ways, in smaller ways, he definitely was. I just remember reading it because, like, this was back, like, early 2000s type shit. Like, I'm reading scans of this, and, man, like, you know, when your comparisons are Yu-Gi-Oh! And fucking Dragon Ball Z and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden you're, like, reading Devilman, you know, it's like, what is this? It was a lot of people, a lot of old heads when it comes to anime are always talking about, like, oh, I was watching all these other cartoons, and then anime came on, and it was, like, so different. And I kind of was like, I almost cringe at that, because, like, it feels like such an old thing to say. It's very personal. I'm not making fun of him for that, because that's exactly how I felt reading this manga compared to like all the other manga I was reading. It's like, shit, there's some depth here that I'm not like fully comprehending. Like there's some like really, there's a gravitas to this work. And that's actually kind of prevalent in all of Go Nagai's stuff, despite being so childlike.
Mm-hmm. Like, despite how indulgent his work is in the violence and sexuality and all of that kind of stuff, like, there is an underlying theme to it that ties it all together in an interesting way and makes it, like, it's more than just the flashiness of, like, violence and sex and stuff. It's like, there's a point to this in the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt watching Crybaby, because there was a point where, you know, at first I was kind of like, oh man, this is really cool. All the sex and violence is pretty cool, and plus it's directed by Masaki Yuasa, who, you know, does a lot of really good work. And I thought he really brought his own unique flair to Crybaby in particular, as he was the one who directed that series. But yeah, at first I just kind of enjoyed it because, you know, it was really violent and everything. But there was a point where I realized, oh man, like, Go Nagai's really trying to say something with this work. and I didn't really fully comprehend it at the time, and I'm not really sure if I still do, but like you could tell there is actually like a message to his work, or at least to the Devilman in particular, and I think that's what I really appreciated about it, is that it wasn't just a celebration of violence, that like there were actually some, like, you know, at least in Crybaby, like there were some really emotional arcs that these characters were going through, and you know, I actually wanted to see where these characters would go and how they would grow, and you know, it's really amazing because I honestly wasn't expecting that from, you know, from something like Devilman.
Yeah, I mean, the reputation of Go Nagai's works is that they are just super hyper-violent, hyper-sexualized, and that is, like, what you tends to be, like, propagated about his work, and you don't usually see, like, when people bring up Go Nagai, they bring up, like, the deeper, like, the thematic aspects that Tyler's work together. They bring up the flash, but not always the substance, at least in my experience. Like, when I just see people talking, when I had seen people talking about it, his stuff before this year, and not really going deeply into it, they would bring up that kind of stuff, but they wouldn't talk about, you know, what was he trying to say with this work? They would bring up, like, kind of the crazier stuff that happens in it, like, you know, decapitations and crazy transformations of vagina monsters and all that stuff.
I think one thing that's super important before we launch too far into this conversation, we do need to understand the creator Go Nagai and who he was. Like, this is a kid who grew up like with the illustrated version of the Bible by Gustav Dorr. So he's seeing these very gothic looking, very expressionistic art that he tries to mimic. In fact, he even kind of does in some of his manga panels for different manga. He does like recreations of the Gustav Dorr. Granted, they're not nearly as magnificent because it's in a manga, but my point is, he's very influenced by this, had an early Christian influence in his life as a kid. He actually, funny story, almost died from diarrhea or something like that.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah. There's even a story that's floating around, and I want to kick myself right now because I have like a version of that to be translated. But basically I was reading through like an old game, forum or something like that, reading about Shin Megami Tensei, which came out around, it's a video game, that came out around the same time as all this. And, supposedly the creators, when they went to go do the second Shin Megami Tensei game, they had heard that Go Nagai had offered to get an exorcism when he was in the middle of writing Devilman. So like, there's a lot of fucking mystique that goes on around this whole manga. Like, Go Nagai had a lot of experiences, even though he was like, what, only 20 something when he's doing this? Like, this came out in like the 70s, 72 or something like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah. He's sitting here as a young 20-year-old man, thought he was going to die. He's always exploring. He's always on the fringes with his work, whether it be sexuality or evil or actual violence or whatever the case may be. You could talk about all his different works. And at one point, I kind of want to tie these all thematically together, because in order to understand Devilman, you have to understand so many other things. But like, this is the guy who created super robots, and that was born out of Devilman. If we didn't have Devilman, we would not have Mazinger Z, which is the whole, mecha thing that was going on. We may not even have magical girls, because if you stop and think about it, like, Cutie Honey was one of the major pioneering aspects about that. Now, granted, it's Sally the Witch and all these other things. The foundation was already there. But I mean, I would argue that Sailor Moon takes more from Cutie Honey than it does.
Especially in transformation sequences.
Especially, yeah. So, I mean, like, this is a guy, although he's really perverse and kind of like your perverted uncle, he has experience on his side that we may not, like, I've never thought I was going to die from diarrhea. Like, that's like the most amazing way I can think of going out, is just like, I literally shit myself to death. Like, it's not funny, but it's fucking hilarious. And it's just like, I cannot think of a better way for Go Nagai to have possibly left this world. Like, when he talks about hell, this man knows some shit. Pardon the pun.
I think that definitely comes out in his work, that paranoia about that fear of dying in some horrific, like, crazy way that could be even darkly humorous. I think that, it definitely carries over and is expressed through Devilman. And it's really interesting that he felt like he wanted to get an exorcism during the writing of Devilman. Maybe he felt like he was being possessed by a devil himself, and that was coming out through his work, and that was making him afraid. Kind of like how, and maybe that's reflected in how Ryo's arc progresses, and how Ryo becomes more frightened about how all his predictions are coming true, and like what his humanity really is, if he is really human. So, yeah, it's really interesting to think about like what is going on in Go Nagai's like, and how that came through in Devilman and made it what it is.
Now, another thing real quick to mention, some other names. We mentioned Tezuka, Osamu Tezuka, obviously, the god of manga. And then, of course, there's his assistant, Shotaro Ishinomori, who you probably know from creating Kamen Rider, Cyborg 009, amongst many other things. Shotaro Ishinomori is to Go Nagai just like Tezuka was to Ishinomori. So we kind of have like a very interesting master and disciple lineage. This is like if freaking Go Nagai is the subject here, he's literally kind of like the grandson, I say that in air quotes, of Tezuka. And that's super hyper interesting to me that literally the Tezuka school ended up technically going through Go Nagai, and Go Nagai is so drastically different, but in many ways very, very similar to Tezuka, doing these very cartoonish type characters, then turning around and talking about very deep things. Like one of Go Nagai's influences, in addition to the Bible, was Tezuka's, I want to call it Lost World. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Dark Horse put it out like years ago. It's in a small white and orange volume. They find a new planet. There are dinosaurs there and all that shit. Dinosaurs are a huge aspect in fucking Go Nagai's brain, just as much as demons or sexuality and violence. So it's very interesting. Like if I were to describe Go Nagai, I say like, yeah, so he likes sex, violence, demons, and dinosaurs, like basically 4Ds all over the place. So.
Yeah, that makes sense considering that's how the story, like literally the story of Devilman starts in like.
The time of dinosaurs.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, I kind of want to talk about a couple things and just launch right long into it. But in order to like really, for me, Devilman is not its own standalone work. You have to have read Demon Lord Dante. Have either of you read that?
I have not actually, no.
Unfortunately, I haven't.
Oh my God, you guys are killing me. Okay, so like Demon Lord Dante is super hyper important because it's one of the first things that Go Nagai created before Devilman. In fact, he created about a year before Devilman. And it has a lot of similar aspects. The main character's name is Ryo, who, gets reused later. And basically, Ryo kind of ends up becoming Devilman, sort of, kind of. He goes up to the Himalayas, and there he ends up, fusing with Dante, the Demon Lord Dante. Mao Dante is literally, evil King Dante or something like that. Magic evil King Dante. And we find out that Dante is actually like the demon incarnation of Judas Iscariot who betrayed Jesus and shit. So like already trying to be very provocateur, typical Go Nagai shit, but whatever. Then he brings in Satanists and there's a whole ritual and shit, very similar to Devilman. But what ends up happening, which is very interesting, is that the main character ends up becoming a giant monster, very akin to something like Godzilla. And as you find out the backstory of Demon Lord Dante, you find out that Dante used to be an actual human who, again, was Judas Iscariot, but he lived in a super hyper futuristic city, Sodom, and then there's like Gomorrah or whatever. And then God came down, and God is like basically the sun. He's just this giant ball of energy, and he fucks everything up because the people who were there, the humans who were already there, didn't, want to go with God or whatever. So he paints God in the very Shin Megami Tensei type way, which references his work, as God is the asshole. God is the bad guy, which of course is super provocative, for a lot of mainstream Christian beliefs and this, that, the other thing. So he goes on, and basically this character, Ryo, ends up flying away in a super jet, which is later revisited in Getter Robo. Okay, so we get that element later. He crashes into a dinosaur and then gets like, he can't get away. He crashes into a T-Rex. He can't get away. Fucking God is like, well, screw you. You're going to be lit on fire forever. And so basically he ends up fusing with his jet and a dinosaur, which is how Demon Lord Dante has this giant ass kind of kaiju type form. And in reality, if you think about it, it's already laying the groundworks for what mecha is. This is a character who's controlling a giant monster, basically a machine. If you've watched Shin Mazinger with the whole idea of like Koji Kabuto sitting there in the Mazinger, and he's like, you can either be the greatest devil or, you know, the ultimate god or whatever the case may be. And he's like, I can't control the robot, and the robot's just swinging around. That is like beat for beat an homage to Demon Lord Dante. Like, that's exactly how that was. So it's very important as we go on, and I'll probably reference Demon Lord Dante going through, because there are elements that you'll learn about as Go Nagai goes through his works that he's developed. Like, for example, in Demon Lord Dante, you know, the original humans are not the humans that you and I are. The humans that you and I are evolved from apes, and God kind of like bestowed a little bit of his essence into these creatures, so that way we became intelligent and we're the modern humans of today. So essentially you get this idea of like the demons aren't necessarily the bad guys. The people who are fusing with the demons are not the bad guys. And that's revisited in Devilman, especially when you get towards the ending with World War III and all these sorts of things happening. That is like, you have the army who's the bad guy, you have like the angels who are bad guys, but like only the people who are fused with demons are actually like the individuals who are fighting for their own freedom. So, I mean, there's lots of shit in there, and I'm kind of done with that rant. But I mean, like, please, for the love of God, go and read Demon Lord Dante. Like, it's super short. It's like 3 volumes of manga. You'll easily get through it, and then you'll be like super, super into Devilman that much more.
You gave a good sell, so I definitely am going to. But it's just incredibly fascinating that Nagai portrays God as the villain, as like the antagonistic force in both Demon Lord Dante and in Devilman. It's like Nagai sympathizes with the deviants, with the monsters, outcasts of society. And that's very interesting to me, because like the heroic force in Devilman ultimately are the Devilmen, who are being hunted down and to be, you know, killed by the governments of the world because they're afraid of them, because they are seen as different and they are seen as dangerous and stuff. And of course, in the conclusion of Devilman, ultimately we find that the reason that that Satan did everything he did was because God created demons, and then he decided he hated demons, so he was going to destroy them, and Satan was like, that is unfair, they are deserving of life. And so he waged war against God to help the demons. And ultimately, you know, when he woke 2 million years later and saw that, you know, humanity was there, you know, he kind of forgot his lesson that was like, you know, humans are also deserving of life, because he saw humans as defiling the earth that the demons should have right over. And so he kind of repeats God's mistake and, you know, commits like genocide an entire race of being on life. So he, you know, becomes what he fought against originally. And the manga, it just ends with, you know, on this incredibly bittersweet, well, it's a pretty depressing ending. It's a tragic ending because, you know, Ryo and the devils and the demons, they've won. They've killed all the Devilmen. They've killed all the humans, but now God and his angels are coming down to fight them. They've exhausted all their energy, all their power, and so now they're going to get wiped out. So, you know, it's just really sad, cyclical cycle of just violence and massacre that ultimately just wipes out all life.
Well, I mean, to me, and this is going to sound a little cheesy, that ending is comparable to like Romeo and Juliet, because these are two lovers on opposite sides who are fighting against each other. They still love each other despite all their differences, and they're both going to meet the same fate because people around them don't appreciate their love. I would go so far as to say, and I mean this in the most respectful way, but just in thematically, like, when you look at Go Nagai and he starts creating things like Okay, Mazinger Z, he created to blow off steam because he was getting so much resistance from Devilman. So that's all about masculinity. It's the 80s, or early 70s still, where like Japan is becoming a tech giant. So you could easily argue that the first giant robot, or not the first giant robot, but like the first mecha, Mazinger Z is all about man coming to terms with his technology, his creations, where you could say like Cutie Honey is all about coming to terms with sexuality, whether it be transgender or homosexuality. And I'm not saying it's like these things are the greatest representation about this, but Go Nagai is always sitting on the fringes trying to poke people's consciousness with things that make them uncomfortable. And his kind of beginning works here with Maledante and Devilman really put him on the map outside of Harenchi Gakuen. He's really trying to push this idea that, hey, maybe what you think is evil isn't actually evil. And when you take that as the thesis statement going into all his other manga and all his other works, it kind of makes sense what he's doing. At the time, how do you talk about these topics of sexuality and violence without seeming completely decadent? Well, Go Nagai says, fuck it, I'm just going to seem completely depraved and craven and dive right in, and you can like it or you won't. And I think it tickles the psyche in such a way that you're willing to kind of hear the message. Now, granted, he delivers the message with a hatchet when he needs a scalpel, but the message is still there. So when you look at like this group of individuals in Devilman, they're being hunted by regular old humans. Okay, that makes sense. So they're being hunted and persecuted by these people. These could be people who believe something outside the norm in terms of religion or politics, or maybe their sexuality is a bit askewed, or this, that, the other thing, or maybe they just are labeled as evil. Basically, the rejects of society are all being kind of forced together and demonized both literally and figuratively in the manga, and they're being wiped out by quote unquote the forces of good, this whole dogma of what is considered sacred and what is considered good and just and all that sort of thing. So both society and dogmatic practices are sandwiching these marginalized groups of people until literally their own destruction. And if you don't stop and look at it, you're going to end up just like them. And I think that's really what, Devilman is all about. Once you can kind of look at that in that light, this stops becoming, whoa, LOL, crazy Japan, and starts becoming more, for lack of a better term, intelligent. Starts becoming a little bit more nuanced, starts actually becoming something that was worth bringing over and translating and then putting it in a nice bound version for millions more people to read. Like, it's about fucking time, really.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's still like a relevant message in terms of this idea of discriminating and designating this group of people as evil, as something to get rid of for the good of the society as a whole. And so you're attacking people within your own country because you're seeing them as the other and getting rid of them as purifying, as keeping peace. But it's all based on like this fear and all based on envy and all these like negative emotions that are just eating the society alive, and it just only serving to its detriment and the detriment of like just human well-being as a whole.
Exactly. And the thing that's really interesting is, even though you have all these devil men, right? So you have, towards the end of the manga, the army, basically all around the world, humans are trying to, become more militant. Actual society is killing people who they suspect as being demons. And the thing is, like, the demons can still, even though, or I shouldn't say the demons, the devilmen can still take their human form and kind of repress their demon side, so that way they still appear as human. There's still like basically witch hunts going on, and they're, killing people out in the street, whether they are or aren't, devilmen. And at the same time, you have the actual demons who are trying to rule the world and actually kill everybody. Satan's forces are there, the whole 9 yards. It's just like the devilmen are sitting there kind of smack dab in the middle of all this, trying to protect some of the humans who aren't trying to kill them, but, trying to fight off the demons. And it's just absolutely insane. And you look at these other sides, and it's like, I love how Go Nagai really draws upon that Gustav Dor influence, and he makes Satan and his angels look specifically, you know, like quote unquote good guys, like you would typically think in a regular Christian painting or whatever. And then the humans who are supposed to be us, the people that we are most likely to relate with, are committing crimes and atrocities that unfortunately we still see in our world today in terms of genocide and racism and bigotry and just complete ignorance as to understanding the individual before passing judgment. So like all of these themes create a very, very thick atmosphere. And the thing is, Harenchi Gakuen had been canceled. Shameless School had been canceled because of PTA feedback. Like, they were fucking pissed, always trying to, you know, shut Go Nagai down. So finally, they managed to succeed, and Go Nagai had the manga end in the most violent and brutal fashion where, like, all the kids get, like, killed. I think there's, like, a, what was it? Like, the PTA comes in and kills all the kids or something like that. Basically, like, the biggest fuck you to ever, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
I mean, literally the PTA killed the manga. It's great.
That's the point. And he's like, look, this is what happens to art when you people are sitting here, like, unable to come to terms and grapple with the darkness of your own psyche. In Devilman, it's very interesting because he kind of does the same thing to us and makes us, the normal human, the bad guy, except this time, you know, he kind of got away with it and was able to finish Devilman. But like, with the mounting tensions that were going on, people hated Devilman just as much as Shameless School. So, you know, this whole thing's going on. He just kind of withstood the backlash this time. Plus he had Mazinger Z, so he kind of had an outlet at the same time for all this insane pressure that's going on. But I mean, like, this manga was being written literally under the same pressure that crushed his last work. So this guy is like kind of, you know, Marlon Brando, a rebel without a cause here, trying to do something that's a little bit avant-garde to a certain extent, at least for conservative Japan.
Mm-hmm. I think he's a rebel with a cause because his goal is to show, and he has a message behind the work to show, hey, don't ignore like the darker aspects of humanity and like try to purge that out. I mean, that's what they're doing in the manga. You know, they're trying to get rid of the Devilman, the so-called, you know, the dangerous elements of humanity and, you know, to protect the whole, but that ultimately is what causes the self-destruction of humanity. He's like addressing this idea of, you know, hey, we should address this, accept this as part of the art, and then also, hey, we should address this and accept this as part of the human self. But also, I mean, this is reflected in like the conversation that Miki's dad has during like the final volume. Basically, it's like he pretty much lays the message bare that, you know, everyone is letting their paranoia get to them, and in like fearing that the person next to them is a demon and trying to, you know, hunt them down, they are becoming demons themselves. And basically everything the humans do in Devilman in terms of like the types of violence they commit against each other are very believable in terms of like stuff that's happened in history, like witch hunts and like this idea of like decapitating people, putting their heads on stakes, putting the limbs on stakes. This is like barbaric, horrifying stuff that has happened in history. So I think that just what makes the manga even more frightening and even more raw is that it's very believable in a way that society could fall apart like this, could destroy itself like this, under this level of paranoia that, you know, the demons set forth. But, of course, ultimately, it's humanity that destroys itself.
I just want to go on record and say that the episode of Crybaby in particular that handles that material and that particular bit is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Like, I was really surprised with just how much raw emotion was in that scene in particular that we're mentioning right now. I was honestly left speechless. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, in the manga, it's incredibly horrifying too, because we have this long sequence of Miki and her family just like making this last stand basically against this angry mob who is trying to like kill them. And, you know, ultimately we just see this the guy that was help protecting Miki, he's killed off, and Miki sees her brother's head, like, held in front of her, her little kid brother. It's like, that's a horrifying sight in itself, but then that's like that's it, that's like the last part of her resistance, because then, like, the mob, like, just encroaches in on her. It's this shapeless black form just of, like, grotesque laughing faces and crazy eyes, and she is like being like ripped into shreds, and it's just this multiple page sequence. Like, first she's like being ripped apart, like her clothes are falling off. It's like just streaks of them just tearing at her, and all the while, like, this amorphous blob of like laughing crazy people is just laughing in the background. And then in the next page we see her being like split apart, and there's like a clear metaphor there for she was violated, and then she's torn apart in the next page, and it's just horrifying. Like her body is just ripped apart, and then it's just like a big, like, one page, and it's just like, just a big, like, jagged black word balloon, and that's it. That's all there is on that page. And then, like, entire sequence, like, just communicating the violence, the fear, the terror of everything that is happening to Miki in that moment is just so brutal and devastating and horrifying.
It is rather interesting that you would get a statement like that from Go Nagai. I mean, in a certain translation, if you look at that just the right way, despite Go Nagai's kind of disregard for feminism, shall we say, and female respect, like, he kind of in that scene shows, like, yeah, so this is like how horrible society is for women right now. Not that necessarily in all parts of the world that this is happening, but like, it's a manga meant to express an idea, and that idea is, look, we're not doing a very good job at this, and once our society crumbles, we're gonna go right back to being fucking cavemen, and this is what cavemen do. So Go Nagai in that light is kind of responsible with his audience, instead of, doing the thing we all know him for in terms of like, oh, okay, here's some tits, here's some blood, sometimes on the same panel. You know what I'm saying? In this case, he actually kind of takes the message and allows the message to push the images, versus what he often does is takes the images and uses that to portray the message. Now, speaking specifically on the panels and like the whole way that Go Nagai draws, like, early Go Nagai is very different than, I don't want to say later Go Nagai, but essentially, like, he's gotten a couple little one shots here and there, and like Go Nagai, although a lot of people say like, okay, he's really doing like the simplistic art style, which is kind of like awkward at times, just completely and utterly awkward. Like, human poses are done in a very Iraqi style, but like without the fucking grace, so it looks really weird and contorted, and everyone's super like gauntly and gangly and all that sort of thing. And he kind of like refines that as he goes on, but that's kind of the charm. And he contrasts this sometimes with, like, I want to say he's like using, what do you call it? The ukiyo pen or whatnot, like the actual brush or whatever the case. I forget what the hell you call it, but like, there are a couple panels where like Amon comes forth with like this absolute rage, and like, to express that, he just paints the panel instead of like drawing it or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Oh, or like, there are scenes, I forget that, I want to call it Black Lion. Is that the name of one of his manga? Where there's like a samurai who's tied up to a cross or whatever the case may be, or he's tied to some pole or some shit like that and basically left to die. I don't remember, but anyway, long story short is there's this one shot that Go Nagai did. And you can see it throughout his other manga too. Like, he'll all of a sudden drop in a very high quality, I don't want to say high quality because that kind of like quantifies the whole thing, but a much more detailed approach, or a much more detailed panel. It kind of reminds me just a little bit. This is like a complete side note. It kind of reminds me of Togashi a lot, the creator of Yu Yu Hakusho and that sort of shit. Cause like, he'll do like one panel of like this face, and it's like death stare, like very intense compared to like the typical manga styling, which is more economic in terms of like pen strokes and that sort of thing. And Go Nagai's art, let's be honest, is super economic. You know, everybody has sideburns. It doesn't matter what your gender is. Everybody kind of has, like I said, these gangly limbs. Violence is like really awkward to watch or read, you know, because it's done in very stilted fashion, you know. So it's kind of hard because sometimes like the manga is super cinematic and looks great, and then other times you're like, how the fuck is his body moving like that? Like, I don't know. It's no wonder these people's heads are popping off, because quite literally they're not meant to move that way.
Yeah, I thought some of the I guess while you were talking about that, the thing that kind of comes to mind is a lot of the scenes in the in the underground club that Rio has, you know, where everybody's dancing and doing drugs or whatever, and some of that dancing is looks a little awkward. There's a great page where like Rio just starts dancing, and he I think I tweeted about this, but Rio starts dancing and he kind of looks at Akira like he wants him to dance at him. Like it's like that kind of weird, awkward stuff that like I should find kind of what's the word I'm looking for, that should kind of turn me off as far as his art goes, but like it's weirdly charming. Because, you know, while I was reading Devilman, just in general, like, you know, at first I don't want to say, like, I wasn't, like, disappointed, but I was a little confused because, like, you know, I felt like up until, honestly, I'm going to say up until, like, you know, Akira actually starts fighting other demons, like, it's mostly a lot of, like, exposition and talking heads, at least to me anyway, but I mean, you know, once Akira starts fighting demons, I feel like the manga gets a little more exciting to read, just in general.
Well, for me, the manga was engaging almost pretty much from the start because the guy just has such a great, you know, flow in his paneling that the manga is just a really easy, quick read. And because, like,
this is true,
he makes the most mileage out of his lines, the panels never feel too cluttered. Everything is extremely, like, readable, and I can tell what's going on. And even if, like, some of the, you know, anatomy or poses are a little off or weird, there's this, you know, eccentric quality, this, like, erratic energy to the manga that just makes things like flow really well. And he just has also a good sense of timing in terms of like, you know, even when characters are talking, like just the way he'll build up like the tension within their talking, even during a single like panel, the way he'll lay out certain lines of exhibition in like normal balloons and then have this big jagged large balloon to emphasize the most dramatic point. It just makes the entire reading experience for me, even during exposition, like really engaging to read. So I actually really enjoyed reading Devilman, like, right from the beginning, because, like, in terms of just keeping energy flowing from page to page, moment to moment, the guy is so good at that.
Honestly, yeah, I'd have to agree.
Well, another really cool thing is, like, I'm looking at the panel when Rio first picks up Akira in the car, and that face reminds me so much of Patrick Star. Like, he looks like fucking Patrick. He looks like Patrick.
Rio is such a great character because he's so, I mean clearly you could tell in like how many of his pages have basically turned into memes at this point and have been memes for a long time, that like he's such an iconic character with like the most expressionless but almost at the same time the most expressive face I've ever seen on any character. Like it's such a weird combination of the two aspects there.
There's an unpredictable quality to him because he has that stoic, almost like bored face most of the time, and then all of a sudden he'll like just yell out and get into a fit of energy, and you're like, whoa, what is wrong with this guy? I mean, that's what the great element is of one of the most famous memes is when Rio is just screaming, my father is dead, because we have like just this quiet panel, you know, Rio is like just looking off, as, you know, while he's driving, he just has this blank stare in his eyes. And, you know, it's just like a quiet moment. And then just all of a sudden he just yells out, "My father's dead!"
See, that's one of the pages that I had always seen out of context for like years, and like reading that in context is even funnier because it's like they're in the car and Akira just goes on about like his entire family situation for like a page, and then Rio doesn't like he doesn't respond to that conversation at all and just goes on to like what's been happening with him.
Well, it's literally after he has the Patrick Star face, too. It's like Patrick Star face and then like, my dad's dead. It's like, wow.
SpongeBob, my dad's dead.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, my God. So, yeah, like, pretty much, yeah, that's what I was saying was that, yeah, like, in context, I think it's even funnier, honestly.
Man, like, this manga...
Like there were times while reading this where like I legitimately couldn't tell if it was campy or if it was like actually legitimately funny.
I think it's often legitimately funny. I think the guy has a very clear sense of humor, so a lot of it to me is intentional. But of course, there's like a lot of I think just there are some moments that could come across as unintentionally funny, like. Because so much of the, drama, like especially when Ryo is like explaining all of the, history of the demons and stuff, and he's getting so worked up about that, like, because of the contrast between like, the expression and what he's saying, it can be very funny.
And with stuff like, Ryo putting on the giant like stone demon mask and stuff. It's stuff like that kind of comes to mind that made me wonder, was this supposed to be funny? I feel like this is supposed to be dramatic, like it's unintentionally funny. Like some of those moments were some of my favorite moments while reading the 7 Seas edition, at least.
I mean, the big, like, emotional build-up to, like, when Ryo and Akira are, like, promising, okay, we are going to merge with those abominations and become monsters and terrifying devils and lose our humanity. And they have tears in their eyes. They're crying. It's like, this is going to be this big dramatic moment, and Akira is yelling, "Let's go, ferryman, open the gates of hell!" And so, they open the door, and what do you see? You see, like, dancing naked girls and debauchery and just a crazy party, because you're expecting, like, this crazy scene of violence, but no, it's just, like, this super weird party full of, like, hipsters and debauchery, and it's like... What is it? I think that was like an intentional joke on Nagai's part for sure, to have this big emotional build up and then like, oh, this is it. And like Akira's expression, Ryo's expression, where he's just got this weird grin, and again the dead stare as Akira's just looking out is like, what? And then Ryo has just has this blank grin. It's just amazing.
Oh, that stuff like that, and then like the page where like his Akira senses start tingling and he's like, I have to go help my friend, and he like literally gets out his gun.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite moments too.
So for some people who may like really love Devilman and want more of it, like there is plenty of shit out there. Like there's obviously Crybaby that came out, there's Amon, there's a whole Shin Devilman. Like, there's a lot of spin-offs. There's an entire manga series that takes place during the Third World War when, like, Akira is trying to fight Satan and all his followers and that sort of thing. And there's, like, tons of spin-offs, one of which I kind of want to mention, at least in passing here, is Violence Jack. Have you guys had a chance to get around to that?
Unfortunately not.
I've actually seen both Violence Jack and Violence Jack 2, the OVAs. And honestly, I really wanted to like the first Violence Jack, but I don't know. I thought it was mostly okay, and then Violence Jack 2 or whatever, I just thought was kind of dumb, and I didn't really like it, honestly.
So I don't want to give it away. I think people who really like Devilman should go and read Violence Jack, because it was created by Go Nagai, literally 1 year later. It actually kind of has a lot of the same trappings. I don't want to tell you why, though. You should watch, go and read it. I don't say watch it, but definitely go and read it. I I don't want to give it away because like it's kind of the whole magic of reading that is when you find that all out. But the flip side is like for anyone who listens to Anime World Order, they've already talked about this and already gave away the spoilers. But my point is find it, get your hands on it, read it, and then get back to me and we can have a conversation. But like for those who might be like, oh, I don't know because I've heard things about Violence Jack being like really violent. It's like, well, first off, no shit. Second off,
what? Violence Jack is violent?
Violence Jack is secretly a manga about Obama. No, so
No, that's Air Gear.
oh. Wow. Wow, that joke was strong.
I totally forgot that existed.
Wow.
Ooh.
Wow, okay. But basically, yeah, if you can read Berserk, you can read this shit, so.
I mean, that's totally fair, yeah.
Air Gear, that was powerful.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the most infamous aspects of that series.
I wish
Obama
that was like...
in the body of a teenage Japanese girl.
I just wish that, that was drawn by Go Nagai. That would actually make sense.
I would certainly be a lot better, I'm sure. But man, yeah, I'll definitely check out Violence Jack. On the subject of, like, other spin-offs to Devilman, Seven Seas is releasing 2 other Devilman manga. Devilman vs. Hades is a sequel to Devilman that takes place when Akira is in hell and he's searching for Miki, and then he just, like, fights Hades and runs across, like, a bunch of, like, the demons he killed in Devilman. So I haven't explored too much of that, just skims through it, but it's pretty interesting. And then Devilman G is a reimagining of Devilman. It takes place more in the modern day. It has a little more fantastical elements because Miki is a witch in this version. Cyrene has a human host. And so I've read like a little bit of that as well. And that leans more into like being more pulpy, it's a little more about, like, the eccentric, like, leaning into the fun aspects of, like, violence and sex, oh my. And it doesn't seem to have as, carry the weight of the original manga. But in terms of just entertainment value, it is a lot of fun. So if you want to support more Devilman manga, you should definitely check those out, because those are also equally fun works.
Yeah, and in case we haven't already sold you on reading Devilman, there's an entire monster that has no pussy. It's just another face down there.
Oh, there are so many of monsters like that.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing a couple of those.
There are at least 3 in Devilman G in particular.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the few things from like Devilman I'd also seen before actually like watching it or reading it was vagina and boob monsters.
Where are our dick monsters though? They're not enough.
Real dicks are already monsters.
I mean, they are pretty ugly.
Yeah.
Well, not mine.
I'm sure yours is beautiful.
I'll take your word for it, Josh. Oh man, but man, I really can't wait to read more of this because I really because I think so far as what I've read, the highlight for me has been Akira's fight with Jinmen. I think that's probably like the biggest standout chapter to me.
Yeah, I would single that out as like my favorite single chapter of Devilman as well. Because like the core concept behind Jinmen is so disturbing and so strong in terms of here is this monster who devours people alive. And so they are like living in agony and in pain on his shell. And so like they're still alive, but like they're in this endless state of suffering. But, they're still alive, so Akira has to decide, will he kill these people in order to kill Jinmen? Because he has to do that in order to kill Jinmen. And then, like, he has to, kill someone he knows, like this little girl. And, like, this little girl is begging him to do it. Like, kill him, I'm already dead. Like, she's in suffering, so, she wants this suffering in the end. A lot of those people on Jinmen's back too. But Akira can't even look, he does look like straight on as he like stabs Jinmen through the back, right through like half of this girl's face. But then we have this amazing page. It's like afterwards, like he looks and he just closes the girl's eye,
That was a great touch, yeah.
And it's just, amazing page. And then, like, he closes his eyes just, in disgust and in sadness of what he has to do. But then, like, he, gets overcome to rage and he just grabs Jinmen's shell and is, like, just rips it off. And Jinmen's like, stop, you're gonna murder everyone in my shell, all of them. And Lord Akira is just, like, so driven by rage, so he just does it anyway. And we don't even see it happen. We just see hear a panel of, like, the crack. We have, like, this black and white panel, like, inverted, inking here in the next panel. It's like, we just hear Jinmen scream. And then we have, like, this amazing panel. We have Akira's face split in two, like, on his left is, like, him as Akira, on the right is him as Devilman, and, like, on his human side as Akira, he's, like, shedding a tear. And, like, there's, like, this black square in between them, just, like, the separation between his humanity and his, demonic side. And then, like, we just see him, like, standing over the shell. His blood is, spraying out with it. And, like, it closes off saying that the shell fossilized is just a dead mask of sorrow. And it's just such a, is such a sad and such a, like, this is, like, the first story that really, in Devilman, that, like, really, like, forces Akira to commit a choice that really leads him down, like, a path that questions his humanity. Because before he's killing, demons, right? He doesn't think that he's taking, like, any human life. But now he does have to, like, take human life in order to, like, kill this monster. And that, like, it robs a little bit of his humanity. It, like, causes a separation within him. And that kind of, like, carries through to, like, the rest of, the story, where now this is, like, the last chapter where, like, Akira is, like, specifically going after this specific demon. Because then the series after this point is him fighting against, like, other humans. Like, there are demons in human disguise, but, where the series eventually goes is him fighting against humans. And so that just continues to, like, weigh on him as, like, what am I even fighting for now? Like, I became Devilman to protect life, but now I have to take human life, and my enemies are humans. So, it's just, like, an incredibly powerful standalone chapter. But also, like, the idea behind Jinmen 2 is very interesting, in the sense that Jinmen makes the case that, it's a sin to take life, so I eat people while they're alive.
That's pretty fucked up.
So here's the cool thing about all this, is, like, you're totally right, Sid. Like, it marks the change in tone that Devilman takes from that point on, because from that point on, it's all about, like, the deep stuff that we've been kind of talking about. But, like, Jinmen himself, there's, like, a Japanese disease or folkloric disease, kind of like, what do you call those? Like a fairy tale or old wise tales or whatever. Kind of like, what do you call, like, the boogeyman? It's not real, but it's like a story that you tell people so that way they learn the moral of it or whatever.
An urban legend?
Sure, we'll go with that. But anyway, it's Jinmenso is the name of it. And basically it's supposed to it's a sore, kind of like a raised red bump or whatever the shit, and it actually has a face, and you're supposed to feed it. So, like, Jinmen is literally that. He's got faces all over him. But he also kind of embodies, like, the dogma of hell. Like, okay, people die, they're gonna go to hell, and they suffer there forever. Forever. And it's like, is that really morally apprehensible? Like, because the whole point, like, that Akira, runs into this dude is because, like, one of his friends goes missing one day or something like that. And that's when he finds her. Basically runs into Jinmen and that sort of thing. So, like, the whole idea in a lot of Christian dogma is that, like, yes, there will be people who go to hell. And it's like, well, is that fucking fair? Like, is that really cool? Are you down with that idea? Because Jinmen is kind of like a bastardization a little bit. It takes it and pushes it a little bit further to make it sensationalized. But that's kind of the idea. It's like, oh yeah, these people are in hell. They're being psychologically tortured and that sort of thing. They can supposedly still feel pain and this, that, the other thing. So, like, that's kind of the whole idea. So if you're not cool with that, and that's kind of Go Nagai bringing again that whole Christian idea in there, and of course mixing a little bit of Japanese folklore in with the whole thing to kind of create what this manga really is. And I think kind of honestly, it's a beautiful take on some of these ideas. Not that, I necessarily 100% agree this, that, the other thing, but it does cause you to think if you're looking for things like that. And that's why Devilman is such a rich manga that has, survived for so long, is because it is rampant with these things. Like whatever you go and look at, as long as you have a mind to see, you will see it. That stuff is really there because Go Nagai, he's a thinker. Like, sure, he thinks weird shit like, I wonder if I could draw a human head decapitated on a pole. But he also thinks things like, man, some of this dogma shit is really fucked up. I'm going to draw a children's cartoon about it.
Yeah, that marriage of like all these like different ideas to like combine to make like this, with Jinman, what you're saying, like there's so many like different ideas going into that you can read into. It's just incredibly fascinating. Especially like how he's combining like Christian theological concepts with like Japanese mythology to create like this new idea to express like something deeper about human suffering and like human life.
Yeah, it's almost like, because like obviously another thing you could look at too, this is going a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole, but the Japanese idea of, harakiri or the whole idea of, is it better to live in shame or to die?
To die a warrior, essentially.
Kinda, but like specifically, I'm kind of reading over some of the manga here, but like, Akira's friend basically kind of begs for death. Is like, hey, just, kill me because like, as it is, I'm dead anyway. So it kind of poses the question, like, if your life is full of bunches of suffering, are you already dead? Like, have you already checked out? And it's like that theme is not so heavy in the whole kind of telling of this tale, because Jinmen is like, you could take that almost isolated and make it a one shot and it still has like all the emotional punch to it. But it's very interesting because like, I don't want to say, wow, this is uniquely a Japanese idea of killing yourself when you're in pain. That's not what I'm trying to say. But it definitely, from a culture that has had this idea, of if you're in pain or if there's something that you just can't live with, then to move on into the next life, and to see that kind of also thrown in there. It's Go Nagai, he's not an idiot. He's not just, a child with a pen. Like, he is poetic. And I think a lot of people kind of just still kind of look at this as like, oh, it's, crazy and decadent. And it is. It really is. But like, Jinmen's another great example. If you look at it and really look at it, it's just as deep as like, fuck it, Bakemonogatari or whatever shit you want to watch. You know what I'm saying? Like, this has actually got some meat and potatoes to it.
I remember seeing a lot of conversation like that when Crybaby premiered about, everybody either like really talking up the themes and messages of Devilman, and then most people just kind of brushing that off as like, oh, it's not that deep. Devilman is not a masterpiece. It's not that great, guys. Get over yourselves. It's not that great.
I remember a lot of the conversation, people saying stuff about like, oh, Rio is like just such this great, amazing gay villain. Like, we finally have a strong gay villain. And that's true. That's definitely true. But I don't see how you could say that and not look at the rest of the series for what it is, because it's so much more than just, I don't know what else to call it, identity, politics wrapped up in a manga. Like, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. It really has, the whole point is being an individual. That's the whole point of the latter half of the manga. Like,
I mean, to be fair, I think Sid and I were talking about this off mic, but I think but basically Crybaby kind of mostly focuses on the more like of the more psychosexual aspects of Devilman almost.
Yeah, that sounds very Yuasa.
I was going to say, there was a lot of focus on that kind of stuff in particular, which I thought was kind of interesting.
So maybe I'm speaking out of turn then, because I haven't seen Crybaby yet, and now I'm kind of regretting it, because it's like, shit, I remember how much I love Devilman. But like in the original manga, like, that's not so much the focus. I mean, it is there. Like, shit. So if we're going to spoil it, like, Rio is Satan, and it's, Satan is an hermaphrodite. So, there's an aspect of that, just say it's, that I I apologize, I'm using it's to in a kind of derogatory term, but like to say that Satan as a being is either he or her or gay or straight kind of doesn't capture the nuance of identity. What is the human? What is creation? Because these creations of demons and devilmen are fighting against each other, but they're so similar. Same with the humans fighting the devilmen and the demons, and then all of a sudden, like, God's going to come down and wipe everybody out because, like, they realize, hey, we're no better than anybody else. We are all just living things trying to get through this world, and look what we did. We fucked everybody up. It's really about the individual and self-realization to a level that permeates through almost every single moral philosophy in the manga. So, I mean, people aren't wrong to think that. I need to go watch Crybaby because maybe that's, that sounds like a very Yuasa thing to focus on. But at the same time, like, the original manga, guys, like, if you loved Crybaby, and I haven't even seen it yet, but I can already tell you, you're going to love the manga. Like, go and check that out. Like, it's super, super good.
I was going to say, Josh, I would really love to see your thoughts on Crybaby because I think you would get something out of it personally.
I'm thinking about starting it as soon as I'm done with this podcast, just popping Netflix on and just like, I want to see episode 1 because it's like shit. Like,
episode 1's pretty good.
Man, you going to make me watch anime again?
Yeah, we should reconvene for a podcast on Crybaby. I haven't seen it yet myself, but man, like after reading through the manga, I just want more Devilman to consume, to be in my life, to explore and examine and think about.
Well, I was even looking at some of the images for Devilman versus Hades, and it's like, that looks kind of nice. I might pick that up and kind of start reading that on the side.
I mean, look, if it's any consolation, guys, you guys are making me want more Devilman, so.
Man. But yeah, it's good. This is some good shit.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's so interesting. It's like, when I finished Crybaby, like, I didn't really know what to think, but it was weird because, like, I was in a weird spot where I was like, I really liked it, and I really liked where it went. I especially love the ending. Like, the very last episode of Crybaby is honestly really amazing. A lot of really crazy shit happens, and I'm sure it's probably pretty similar to the ending of the manga. I don't know, but like, I was in this weird spot where I was like, I really, really like this, but I don't know if I consider it good or not. And honestly, this conversation is really helping me realize that, yeah, Devilman is it's a lot better than just, oh yeah, look at this celebration of sex and violence. Oh, it's like, there's a lot more to it than the pulp, and I think I really appreciate Devilman for that aspect alone.
I mean, imagine if, like, Berserk had themes this prevalent running through it. Now, granted, Berserk is, like, a completely different medium. It's, long running.
I was going to say, like, Berserk has themes, but, like...
But not as concentrated because you're trying to, like, go through an entire series. But, like, with Go Nagai here, like, all his manga works are fairly short. Like, they don't extend beyond, like, 10 volumes type shit. So he can really just say whatever the hell he wants. He's like a stand-up comedian. He says what he wants. He makes the point. You laugh, you cry, or you cringe, and then he moves on. Like, that is literally his delivery. He is a stand-up comedian in, like, the finest way that manga can produce.
Honestly, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, because, like, for me, like, Devilman, my perception of it that was that it would be like more of a celebration of violence and sex, but really it's not necessarily a condemnation of it, but it's like lamenting of what value there is in it and like the extremity, because like you read through the manga and you have a good time enjoying all this like violence, all this like sexually charged imagery, and then you get to the end and you just sit there and you're like thinking about, man, was everything that happened in this story, was everything that the characters that they did worked it when it led to like their own self-destruction. So it's very thoughtful in that respect, and that's what I really like about it. I also just like, I haven't engaged with many of Nagai's works outside of Devilman, except for Mazinger Z Infinity, which I saw earlier this year, and one commonality that I just see between Devilman and A Message in that film is Nagai exploring how humanity interacts with itself and how humanity lets their personal interests, their paranoia, their fears, their jealousies interfere with choosing what is best for humanity as a whole, and also lead them to their own mutually assured destruction in a way. And like both Mazinger Z Infinity and Devilman explore this idea. Is humanity worth saving if humanity is just so quick to turn on itself and is capable of committing like such atrocities upon each other? And what will it take to unite humanity? And what will it take to make a better world and be a better person? Like, what does it mean to be human? What defines your humanity? So I really am fascinated with that idea, and I really want to explore the guy's entire mangography to like look at like how he explores this idea between all of his works. Because between just reading Devilman and thinking about that film, there seems to be a clear interest here in how human beings behave between each other and what that says about who we are as creatures, about our like identity and being. And I just want to see like what he has to say about that and how that has changed like over the like course of his series, like throughout his career.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what Shin Devilman kind of points out too, is as they're traveling through time, you know, they're running into all these historical figures and kind of working around the violence that humanity, I mean, like literally the whole point of it is they're in a time slip. They keep bouncing through different parts of time. And each time they do, there's a major moment in human history, such as meeting a young man named Adolf. I wonder who that is. Or like towards the end, when they run into Crazy Horse and, you know, that whole massacre that happens there. You know, so you have all these things that are going on with like humanity when people are being the absolute worst that they can possibly be, the worst day, you know, the worst form of humanity, right? And so Shin Devilman is like trying to toss all these things at you at once. It's just more thematic, I don't want to call it fluff, but like backing support for what the, you know, the average Devilman reader might not be hitting on. Like it kind of seems like a frivolous kind of, okay, we're just going around doing popular things with popular people because I'm Go Nagai and I'm wacky. But if you look at it in terms of the themes that we've been talking about, like that, it's just more of the same. You know, Shin Devilman is not as nuanced because it's kind of like a couple vignettes kind of strung together. But I would definitely say, you know, it goes right along with Devilman thematically, absolutely and completely.
Yeah, it emphasizes the idea that humanity's worst enemy is itself, because even though ostensibly, you know, Ryo and Akira are going after and fighting demons who are interfering with the time period, ultimately it is not the demons who cause, like, the atrocities that happen ultimately, because Jeanne d'Arc is still tried years later for being a witch. Hitler, you know, he was always anti-Semitic, and that incident that they get involved in did is like just reinforce like his already existing ideas of like he hates Jews and he wants to destroy them. And of course, you get to the final chapter in Shin Devilman, and there aren't any demons at all. It's just General Custard, is that the name of the guy? And his gang who like just massacres this entire Indian village. And you know, of course, you know, Akira thinks that these generals, is it Sherman or whoever?
No, it's Custard. You're right.
And Custard. So like he thinks Custard and his group, they were being possessed by, you know, demons and stuff, but really, it's like very heavily implied they're just normal humans, and they just committed these horrific acts because they just indulged in the violence, indulged themselves in hate and in the destruction of other human beings and the suffering of other human beings. Like, when they see Akira, they say, "Oh my god, it's the devil," but Akira replies, "No, the only demons here are you." So, I mean, it just really hammers down on the idea that, like, we humans, like, we imagine, like, monsters and demons and all this stuff of our nightmares, but, like, the scariest things are all tied to, like, parts of ourself, of our psyche, and what we are capable of, and those kind of horrific atrocities that we have done in the past and that we may continue to do in the past. That, you know, as evidenced in, like, the second half of Devilman, with what happens, with how society turns on each other, like, there's always that constant fear that, you know, this has happened in the past, people turning on each other, selling out their neighbors, like, it all in their effort to escape debt, all in the effort for self-preservation. They commit horrific acts just to keep themselves alive, and it just destroys everyone, ultimately, in the end. And so, you know, I think it's very clever, or at least it's very fitting that Shin Devilman is included in the, you know, in newer editions of the Devilman manga as a whole when they reprinted, and especially in 7 Seasons edition, because it does, like, really emphasize that theme that the series explores.
Which we were kind of talking about it off mic, but, like, I was a little caught off guard because, like, basically the manga transitions from Akira's fight with Jinmen to suddenly, oh, Rio, we're jumping through time. What's happening? And, you know, like, I was a bit caught off guard, but at the same time I was like, okay, I'm totally okay with them just jumping through time, fighting demons. Okay, whatever. I'm already reading this. I guess I'm okay with it. It was kind of weird, but, like, some of those chapters were really interesting, especially the I like the out of, like, the 3 or 4 that are in the first volume of the 7 Seas edition. I really I thought the Adolf one was really interesting. Because I feel kind of dumb, because at first I was thinking, they don't beat Adolf Hitler, do they? So there was a little doubt in my mind at first, but by the end I was like, oh, okay, clearly, yeah. I don't know why I didn't think it was Hitler, but whatever. But no, yeah, like you said, Sid, it's really interesting how, like, you know, because at first I was kind of thinking, it's just kind of jokingly, like, I even jokingly tweeted about how, like, oh, here's the biggest twist of Devilman, that it was the demon's fault all along. Hitler did nothing wrong. But, like, you know, that is a really interesting thing you brought up earlier, was that, you know, the demons, at least in that chapter in particular, didn't really do anything to change what actually happens in real history, because, again, clearly, like, Adolf is already pretty anti-Semitic. This just basically, this was still kind of the catalyst to, like, basically what led him down the path that he went down. But, like, ultimately, they didn't, like, the demon in that chapter didn't really actually change anything, which I think is actually really interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it's, like, also tying to this idea that, you know, Akira is trying to save these people from the demons, but he fails every time, because he doesn't save Jean d'Arc, you know, he doesn't change history so that Adolf Hitler doesn't come into power and cause the Holocaust. He doesn't save Marie Antoinette, you know, he goes into her heart to, like, take the demon out of her and, like, you know, fights through time. But by doing that, by getting the demon that was, like, helping Marie Antoinette kind of survive in a way, he kind of condemns her to, like, getting captured in the French Revolution and then getting executed. So, all throughout in these stories, like, Akira thinks he's doing the right things by fighting these demons and, you know, trying to save human lives, but ultimately he's causing the death of more human lives. He's failing to save the people he's setting out to save, and that's ultimately, you know, true of Devilman, the series as a whole. Like, Akira sets out to save humanity, and he fails utterly. Humanity is wiped out. And another particularly interesting chapter is also when they encounter Nike, who is, like, this angelic-looking demon, the goddess of war, who's, like, giving, like, futuristic weapons to Samothracians, like, to fight against Athenians and stuff.
That was some pretty crazy shit. Just, like, seeing these guys just, like, ask for weapons, and then you just have this angel-looking person just giving people guns.
Go Nagai to the core.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, but what's really interesting about it to me is like Nikkei has this connection with Amon that they were lovers, and so it ties into the idea that the demons, they have like feelings, they have human feelings, like they can love each other. They're not like monsters without any humanity in them. Like they have their own humanity, and that's something that is touched upon like in the Serene chapter, with Serene and her relationship with Cain. Their relationship is very, they love each other, or at least Cain loves Serene, so he makes that sacrifice for her. And we see like there's like vulnerability to those characters, and we see that here with Nikkei too, is that we think that like Amon, the demon that Kira has taken the powers from, like that was just like the ultimate strongest evilest devil. But like here we're getting this idea that Amon had a lover. Amon himself had this human side to him, and his feelings towards Miki are reflected in Amon's feelings towards Nikkei. And that's just a very interesting idea to also touch upon, and it's foreshadowing, of course, for later with what the demons' goals were, like their own self-preservation, like them fighting for their right to live against God. It's just, this idea that, we're all humans. Like there's just touching into this inner humanity that like what you think is evil might not actually be evil, but like it's just a mischaracterization, a misunderstanding, and like a relationship built on fear and of paranoia. And it's also very telling that Ryo is the one to kill Nikkei, and there's like no indication that Nikkei was going to betray Akira or Amon at all. Like they were like running towards each other, praying to embrace. She didn't have any weapons on her, but Ryo comes in and decapitates her, and it's like, does Ryo have a sense of himself at the moment? Does he know that Satan is just trying to prevent Akira from realizing some aspect of like his plan? Or is it just that Ryo in that moment is just afraid of a monster without understanding them? It's like he yells like, don't let her trick you, Akira, you're human. But like, was Nikkei tricking them? Like, it's just touching upon, again, these acts of violence that we commit out of fear and mistrust, like often groundless, but just, because we are insecure about ourselves, and like, because we are just trying to preserve ourselves, so we get rid of the other that is what we perceive to be a threat to us. And, with, of course, Ryo killing Nikkei, the lover of Amon, the lover of Akira, we have that subtext there that Ryo is disposing of a potential rival for his person that he loves. So there's a whole lot of interesting like ideas in the subtext towards like a lot of these Shin Devilman chapters. They're not necessary in like the grand scheme of understanding the story of Devilman, but I like their inclusion like in this release, because they do like re-emphasize the themes in very interesting and thought-provoking ways.
And to think all of this came from just 3 weeks of diarrhea.
Man, I mean, I guess now we also know why Kagashi has such crazy ideas, because he's constantly sick all the time, too. He's constantly in pain as well.
That must be it. That must be it.
Artists in pain come up with, like, the most profound, deepest cuts into understanding, like, the depths of the human psyche and the suffering in the human soul. And they love to convey their own suffering in their work.
I mean, what else are you supposed to do in that kind of situation other than suffer and think about that suffering? But I guess, is there anything else we want to touch on, or?
I think that Devilman is such a dense work that we could go on and find more things to talk about. But honestly, with everything Josh has discussed and brought up about Go Nagai's career and things that have influenced him in creating Devilman, including like aspects about his other series, I feel like we could reconvene at a later date to discuss Go Nagai, like as a whole, his mangography as a whole, his career as a whole, because I think there's just so much more to dig into there and explore there. And like, I'm really jazzed about that idea after this conversation.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fun idea for another show.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, you can't. There's too much to talk about when it comes to Go Nagai. Like, yeah, I'm just gonna end that sentence there because there's a lot you could just bring up and such. And man, like, he contributed just so much into, I don't know, to kind of like try and marginalize it in just a conversation about Devilman would be kind of impossible. Like, he did a lot. He did monstrous amounts of work and that sort of thing. So it's just like, you could probably sit down, have an episode of like going chronologically, like talk about this work and the themes, moving through that, like a character, you know, a mangaka spotlight or some shit like that. That would be dope.
I think that would be a great idea, you know, maybe even for like a multi-podcast kind of project where we goes through all of his works in chronological order and like track the development of like his themes and storytelling and like how all these things influence each other. And like, of course, he had multiple manga running at the same time, so like it'd be interesting to see how we could organize that. But like, you know, just this conversation has just got me like really, really excited to dig into Go Nagai more. Like, I already for the longest time wanted to get into more of his stuff, but like after reading Devilman, thinking about Devilman, talking about it here, and then just thinking about the connections between Devilman and what I know of his other works, and like in particular what I had seen in Mazinger Z Infinity that I found so attractive and interesting, like, man, I'm just gonna go on a Go Nagai kick this summer, I think.
Dude, totally do it. Like, I can already hear the opening to the podcast to be like some cute, nicey piano. It's like, you're listening to part 1 of Go Nagai, an ass in pain.
That's pretty good.
That should be the subtitle for that podcast series.
Making fun of a man's like possible near-death. It was a near-death experience, but I mean, like, shit, that's like, can we stop and bathe in this idea? Like, you're a famous person and it's out there on the internet for anyone to see that you almost died from pooping. Like, you almost died from pooping. That poor man. And everybody knows.
I mean, he's still alive and kicking.
Somehow, yeah. But yeah, no, we should definitely talk more about Go Nagai at a later date, because I'd be interested in doing that too.
Mm-hmm. But I suppose that wraps us up for the discussion, unless we have anything else we really want to talk about.
I think I'm pretty good on my end.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, thank you, Josh, for coming on the show again. Like, it was so great to have you on, and we learned a lot about Go Nagai's history and what influenced him writing Devilman from you. So thank you.
Nah, shit, man. Thanks for giving me a spot back on the old anime train. It's or I guess this is the manga train. I'm sorry. I thought I was on the other train.
Manga, anime, whatever. It's
all the same. Yeah. But no, it's great talking with you guys again. It's been way too fucking long. So like, I gotta thank you guys for letting me on the show. It's amazing. Thank you.
Oh, no problem, Josh. I personally, I miss talking to you. We need to talk more at some point or something, because we need to catch up or something.
Totes my goats.
But I guess, Josh, where can the good people find you?
Nowhere.
I know. That's probably a silly question to ask, because I know you haven't really been on Twitter too much lately. You've been kind of busy.
Oh man. So ever since I ended up moving, like Senpai Coast to Coast, I haven't been doing that for a while because I got too busy doing the whole wave motion canon thing. But now I'm too busy to do the wave motion canon thing. Like, I'm trying to still get stuff out there. But it's kind of tricky at the moment because I'm still chasing the whole idea with my music and that sort of thing. So it's a bit of a full plate. But long story short, if you're interested in seeing the work that I have done, and there's a lot of work I've done kind of in the similar vein, please check out wavemotioncanon.com. There's a lot of amazing pieces of writing on there that aren't just mine. A lot of my friends were writing on that too. And then, of course, if you want to hear more of my podcast, I actually have to pay my motherfucking Libsyn bill. For some reason, it didn't go through. So you can't currently listen to it. But Senpai Coast to Coast, please go and check that out. and, give me some feedback. I mean, hell, if you want to hear me on the show again, make sure you let Colton and Sid know so that way they can say, man, where's that guy who was like chatting all about diarrhea? Where is he?
He's my favorite Manga Mavericks guest.
That's probably the only one who does that. Someone's going to steal my bit in the next year and a half before I can get a chance to get on again. I have to think of a new bit.
Oh, I mean, you've got plenty of them. I'm sure the well's not completely dry yet.
This is true. They just bring out Pedros on.
My favorite life lessons character. No, but yeah, hopefully we can have you on again at some point, Josh. Yeah, like I said, we'll have to try and find some time to bring you on to talk about more Go Nagai. Once we're done talking about all this Shonen Jump stuff, because apparently it's the 50th anniversary of Jump, and that's all.
Wow,
here.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Shit, man. Wow. Okay, that's awesome. That's fucking awesome.
But so where can people find you on Twitter?
Oh, yes. My Twitter handle is Josh_Dunham. That's Dunham. Hit me up, ask me questions, like engage in conversation. I'm usually pretty good. If people try to talk to me, I'll try and respond back, that sort of thing. I would like to make more time for the animus and the mangas, but until I can kind of clear that portion of my life and get that in order. I still have thousands of my books, not thousands, maybe 100 or 200 books, still in motherfucking boxes, shit that needs to be translated. I just simply haven't done yet. So
and all the Gintama that you still need to watch. I mean,
hey, I just got done watching an episode of Gintama, and it was starting to get kind of serious, Colton.
Yeah, I know that's the biggest problem with Gintama. It just gets too serious.
Yes. Hyper duper mega serious. I'm pretty sure there's a Gintama Devilman crossover coming soon.
Actually, it's really funny you say that, but we'll talk about that off mic. Sid,
can we talk about it on mic? That sounds really badass.
No, we'll talk about it off mic. Sid, where can the good people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at @LumRamiyasha and on Animation Revelation. I guess not on my Animalist anymore until they get the profile pages back up. I don't know. But anywhere that I am, you'll find me under the name Ramayasha. I also do reviews for all-comic.com, manga reviews. I think I'll have a review up for Devilman Classic Collection Volume 1 up pretty shortly. And I have other volume reviews that I plan to get out this month too, that I'm really excited to write. And of course, I regularly review Dragon Ball Super chapters, so you can check those on there as well.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know you were writing a review for Devilman. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I guess as for me, you can find me on Twitter at SniperKing323 and all the various things that I'm reading. I actually finally made, because I don't plug it too often because I don't really get to do much on there because I just don't have the time. But I do have my own personal blog called Colton Corner at WordPress. And I do have a section on that site where I basically collect all of my manga threads. And I finally got that all organized today. And I have a pinned tweet basically with the link to that page on my website. So now I have an organized place where you can check out all my manga threads. I am apparently reading a lot more than I thought I was, and man, I need to slow down on some of those. Yeah, I'm reading a shit ton of stuff, and basically that's where you can find all my threads. If you're so interested in just checking out all the stuff I'm reading and basically all my tweets or whatever. I do a few other podcasts such as Life Lessons, the Gintama Manga Cast. It's on a bit of a hiatus at the moment, but I am kind of mulling around some ideas as to how I want to bring that podcast back. So I'm in the process of pondering, what I want to do with the show. So, it's not completely dead, I promise. I just try to figure out how to actually bring that back. So, but we still have 50, 60 episodes of that podcast you can listen to. There's a huge backlog, basically just me talking about the Gintama manga in particular as it was used to be released by Viz Media. And you can find that at getintolifelessons.wordpress.com. And you can also listen to One Podcast Prevails at onepodcastprevails.com. Basically, it's the same idea as Life Lessons, except my friend Doctor and I talk about Case Closed or Detective Conan or whatever you want to call it or whatever. And we basically spend every episode talking about a particular arc or case from that series through the manga. That is actually still being released by Viz. I don't know how, but it is. And again, that's at onepodcastprevails.com. Please listen to that show. I really like recording that show. And I guess just as for the podcast and All Comic, you can find every one of our Manga Mavericks podcasts over at all-comic.com. And you can also follow All Comic on facebook.com/all.comic or on twitter.com/allcomic_. But if you want to follow just Manga Mavericks in particular, you want to follow us on Twitter at manga_Mavericks for all the latest updates on the podcast and whatnot. You can also follow us on mangamavericks.tumblr.com, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel over at youtube.com/Manga Mavericks. Please watch our videos, like, subscribe, rate, and review, whatever, on our YouTube channel. So also, if you have any if you have any thoughts on Devilman or Go Nagai or really whatever manga you're reading or anything podcast related, you can send us an email over at mangamavericks@gmail.com. Please send us emails. We love reading them. And I guess basically the most important thing you guys can do is subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever you call it. I don't know. I liked iTunes, but I guess Apple just has to change everything. I don't know. But yeah, definitely leave us a review or rating on there. That definitely helps the visibility of our podcast. So definitely do that if you have the time or if you so wish to. But again, a big special thanks to Josh for coming on the show, and thank you guys for listening to episode 49 of the Manga Mavericks podcast. We will see you guys next time for episode 50. Bye, guys.
Sayonara.
俺はデビルマンだ。